afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Bannister. I'm Dean of the College of Business and Economics here at Boise State University. And I welcome you to campus, welcome you to the College of Business and Economics and to Skaggs Hall, and to be part of this event. And I have to say, on behalf of the College of Business and Economics, we're glad to support the state of Idaho, the Idaho economy. This last year, we graduated 1,013 graduates between undergraduate and graduate degrees, which was a record by over 100 students, more than we'd ever done before. Our enrollments for fall look great, and we're excited to have students back on campus, and that we're charging forward with excitement and enthusiasm. And I'm excited that we're able to host this event here, and hope to have other opportunities to bring the Idaho Technology Council to campus and to work with you. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Jay Larson, President and CEO of the Technology Council, and to say, Jay, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. We are so a pleasure to have Dean Mark Bannister as our Dean of the College of Business and Economics, and all the wonderful things that are taking place here, because I think that what we're seeing is that there's a lot more connectivity that's taken place and a lot of activity and direction and vision. So thanks, Mark, for all the things you're doing. And thanks for hosting us today. So, I also wanted to make sure this is also sponsored by Alturas, Holland and Hart, BR Wealth Management, Idaho Central Credit Union, and also Built in Idaho. So let's hear it for those sponsors that kind of helped us put this on. The Capital Connect series we've had the Count Story, we've done Preco Story, and now we get the opportunity, obviously, to listen. By the way, we should have you come up and juggle. Did you bring anything? How about sandwich boxes? See, we could do this again. Anyway, sorry, Dave. But we should always note that the Capital Connect series is about trying to help us amplify messages that are taking place of exceedingly strong companies that have had amazing success, had a lot of failures too along the way, and other pivots in order for them to be able to get to the point where they are today. And so this is a tremendous opportunity. We're going to have this at the third Tuesday of every month, so you can put it on your calendar. We're going to try to do a mix between live like this, and thank you all for coming out and braving this. I got several calls this morning and yesterday, people saying, "Are you still going forward?" And I said, "Heck yeah, we're going to try to do this, guys." I hope everybody here remains and stays healthy. I know, Blake, your family has had some COVID several months ago, and you guys survived through it. Sorry, Blake. I should say Alan. No, I shouldn't. No, I don't know. I don't know who else has. You're out of here. Sorry. But I think everybody survived very admirably during this time, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing on it. And we're going to see what we can continue to do to go forward and have events that are live as well as ones that are virtual. Also, if you just put it on your calendar, October 21st, we're planning to do the Hall of Fame, the Idaho Innovation Awards, live that day, and our keynote speaker is going to be Coach Andy Avalos at that point. And we're just going to have 2 inductees that are going to be simply amazing. So you'll hear more about that in the future here. Okay, so one thing that we need to also let you know is that as we do these, it's really important that we have people that are just doing extraordinary things. So I want to introduce our 2 participants today. I guess participants might be a little bit awkward, but first, Allison Johnson. She's with Holland and Hart. Allison was born at St. Luke's Hospital and is a local Idahoan who went to Capitol High, but then she graduated, got her law degree at Santa Clara, and then worked in Silicon Valley. And I had the chance to be able to go to lunch with Allison when she had just returned. We were at the Fork Restaurants, remember, Allison? And at that restaurant, I had the chance to say, Allison's coming back, and to be able to see kind of the boomerang of talent that can come back, people who've done some amazing things, and she just loves the quality of life that is offered here in Boise. And so her and her family moved back here, and It's a fantastic deal because I call them the power couple, her and Chris Johnson. Sorry, Allison, I know. But it's with Sensi. And so Allison and Chris are just absolutely wonderful. But Allison is helping lead with Blake the Capital Connect committee that we have, and we really appreciate their leadership. And the vision that Allison has, and she'll be kind of helping do ask the fireside chat with George Mulhern. Now, George is another one that I had the opportunity to meet him. We had just started the Idaho Technology Council in 2009. And what year did you go over to Highway 12? Yeah, so I had just come in. I had a meeting with Mark Sullen, and I walked in, and he introduced me to George, and he said, "Now George was one of the top leaders at HP, and now it was over as a partner working with Highway 12." And then he had the chance to be able to go when I think there was a few bumps along the road with Cradle Point, and George went over to Cradle Point. I had a meeting with George over at their old offices, and George said, one of the reasons I was brought in is to grow and scale Cradle Point so it could be in a position to be able to be a major asset for the state of Idaho. And as last year, you all know that they were sold for $1.1 billion to Ericsson, and George and his team were amazing to make that happen. I want you to know that we have one of the top leaders in the Idaho business community in George Mulhern, and that's just not me saying it. It's other organizations that have recognized George as one of the top, and they give ratings on multiple factors, and George comes out amazing on those. In fact, you'll look at a lot of other companies that are in the same place. George is the top in a lot of these rankings. So we have the opportunity to listen to somebody who knows how to influence, knows how to guide, knows how to have the vision of all of the acumen that needs. The only thing that I want you to know about George is that he went to San Jose State, where he was a Spartan, and he got his undergraduate and his MBA there, and he played tennis. But other than that, I mean, George, that is a cool place, but we're at Boise State. We just need to be able to have that rivalry a little bit. So anyway, let's go ahead and welcome George and Allison to the stage, and let's listen to this fireside chat.
Thanks, Jay. That was quite the introduction.
Most of it wasn't true, but yeah.
But George, I've known you for a fair number of years, and you've always been supportive of ITC, and you've always been supportive of your community. And I can say firsthand, when I've seen local businesses or entrepreneurs raise their hand and say, I need help with something, or I need a mentor, you've always been the first to volunteer. And I think that speaks volumes about the type of leader that you are. And so I'm excited to hear about the Cradle Point success story. And you all are in for a great success story. As Jay said, we were really excited to have an in-person event, and we're very excited that we got to continue on that trajectory and share the story with people in the room and online as well.
I'd have to correct one thing Jay said right up front. Well, first of all, I don't know where that rating system thing is you're talking about. I've never seen it, but I was actually brought into Cradle Point by the current investors, hoping they could at least get part of their money back. It wasn't to scale and grow a super large company. That happened later when we wound up with a bunch of fantastic employees. And so. Yeah.
Well, let's start there, because I think your door into Cradle Point kind of came through, your initial introduction came through your work with Highway 12. So can you talk to us a little bit about were you with Highway 12 when they made their initial investment in Cradle Point?
Yeah, I was. So I was a general partner there. I didn't make the investment in Cradle Point. Michael did, and he was on the board. We had decided at Highway 12 we weren't going to raise a third fund, and at that time Cradle Point had hit kind of a hard spot, and so their board was looking to do a CEO change, and they were in a hurry because the company was out of money, and I happened to be the only guy in town, and they didn't want to do a big search. And so they asked me to come over. I mean, it was kind of funny in some ways because I did have to interview with some of the investors. And one I had known, Jerry Langler, from doing some other things. And so he was pretty solidly supportive of me. One of the other investors just said, I don't think you have the energy level to do this. And, you don't seem that dynamic and all that stuff. I said, well, whatever.
He didn't score you quite as high on those
No,
rankings.
he was not in that whatever rating system that you're talking about. And they also wanted us to whack R&D big and to get the cost structure in line. I said, how you can't cut R&D in a tech company and expect to grow it. But anyway, so I'm getting sidetracked. Sorry.
Yeah. So did you, when you were approached or when the opportunity presented itself, and you went from working with on the investor side of the company versus going in to lead the company as an executive, how did you assess that personally for you? And how did the hats that you wore as an investor versus an executive, did they change? Or how did you look at things differently wearing those two hats?
Much differently, actually. I mean, I knew Cradlepoint. I knew some of the employees. Some had come out of HP. A great engineering team. A lot of really smart folks. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. Being an investor, like in Highway 12, basically what you do is you sort through a whole bunch of opportunities and companies, and then you invest in them, and then you sit on the board once a quarter and provide advice nobody wants. And then you go home and you do whatever you do. And I remember telling Karen, my wife, I said, if I do this is going to be an all-consuming job. And this is going to change our work-life balance and things. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I did a lot of research into the market opportunity. I had some connections at McKinsey and talked to them about this whole cellular space and how they saw that evolving and things. So I did quite a bit of homework before going over there, and then thought, got great engineers, looks like a space that's going to grow. They don't have anything else to do it, so I went over.
I think they probably had other options. So talk to us a little bit about, I mean, it sounds like you entered the company when you said they were out of money and the investors were looking for a partial return on their investment, which means that, I work with startups all the time, and this happens in the startup world. And this was, in a time when the economy was not performing well generally. And so we see it happen all the time. But what was it like to enter a company that was at best struggling and at worst looking at opportunities to potentially wind things up or do a fire sale or pursue other options? How did you keep the team members that remained motivated to build a company, and how do you start from there and grow something to what you did today?
Well, the first thing I asked the board and the investors was, if we have to do a layoff, could you do it before I get there? So, I don't come in and I'm Darth Vader. And they didn't. So my first day on the job, I had to announce we have to let 15% of the workforce go. And we're going to try to do it in a couple of weeks and do the best we can to figure this out and then get back on track. And so that was a little bit of a rough way to start, and then kind of dig out of that hole of how do you build trust, and then how do you find the truth in the organization, right? Because walking into an organization like that that's struggling, everybody has an idea of what's wrong and who's made it wrong and things like that. And so it took a little while to kind of sort through who should be on the team and who shouldn't from a leadership standpoint. And it turned out there's some fantastic people that are still leaders in the company from 10 plus years ago. One of them, the co-founder, Ryan Adamson, who's a very low ego guy. He just wanted to build a big company. It wasn't all about him. It was let's go build a company together. So sorting through that, and then the thing I would say if you're ever going into that situation. One, it's a little easier in some respects because you can only improve right from where you are. So you can only go up from that. And then the other is, I'd say commit to yourself. You're not going to make any really major decisions for 4 to 6 months. The board always wants to know what's your 30, 60, 90-day plan and how are you going to turn this around? That just takes longer than that, to learn who the customers are, to learn who the partners are, to learn who the real talent is in the organization, what the opportunity is, what the environment you're getting into. And you can very easily, I think, trying to show big momentum, make some early decisions that you're going to regret later. You definitely want to find those quick wins to show momentum, but those should be maybe less dramatic kinds of changes.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Do you have moments or milestones that come to mind when, not immediately, but as you got to know the company and its people and its customers, were there milestones or moments in those, 4, 6, 8, 12-month timeline that you hit that you can recall that you said, we're moving in the right direction? What were the signals that you looked for in deciding whether or not the changes you were implementing were the right ones for the company and its people?
The other thing I found too is a lot of the folks in the company knew what we needed to do and knew where the opportunities were, and had been limited in some ways by, really the majority of the revenue at that time was coming from the consumer business. The company had wanted to pivot more towards the enterprise and was kind of in that process, but got stuck a little bit, kept being drawn into kind of consumer and carrier opportunities, which were probably not right long-term, but had some short-term appeal to them, that kind of the next shiny object. So I think there was a large percent of the population that knew to get to the enterprise, one, we were going to have to exit the consumer business. And so we basically built a plan that said, we're going to put 20% of the company resource on consumer because we have to have that money to survive. That's paying some of the bills, but it was not a good business. It was 30% gross margin and 25% returns every quarter. But we needed that funding. And then we knew we had a business in failover. So if your wired network goes down, you fail over to the wireless network, and State Farm was a first big enterprise customer for that. So we said, we're going to put, 50, 60% of the resources of the company on failover and go try to build that. And then there was this emerging opportunity around what they called at the time M2M, which is IoT. We said, we don't know about this yet, but let's put 20% of the resources on this M2M thing and see if that amounts to anything. And just helping to provide a little bit of clarity there. The team rallied behind it pretty quick, and we had virtually no go-to-market either. So we had to build go-to-market. We had a couple of really good salespeople like Ryan Adamson and Tony Puopolo that we started to build around and get a go-to-market together. So there's so many, we screwed up many times and, made mistakes and then backed up from them and took another run at it. But
yeah, it sounds like research and development played a huge role in your success. And so your inclination to not cut that budget and that team really played a big role. Do you think your focus as a tech company and as a business on innovating and research and innovation, do you think that drives the people culture of your business as well? And do you think that there's interplay into having a culture of research and innovation on the tech side and being able to try new things as a company from the cultural perspective too?
One of the things that was so impressive for me about the R&D team that we had was they were so customer focused. They were so focused on building a quality solution for the customer. It wasn't just about, I get to work on the coolest technology, and I've seen that in some places where that can take on a life of its own. Our engineers really wanted to make a difference in customer life, and they want to know how much did we sell this week and what, those types of things. And that the customer centricity, I think, became a much more integral part of the culture of the company. And today, and I think that's absolutely essential, right? Who's your customer, and stay focused on that. It helps break every tie in discussions inside the company. And I think every one of our employees today knows they have a role in making our customers successful at every touch point along that customer journey. And all of our employees, I think, take a lot of pride in making it work for the customer in whatever they're doing. And that became a central part of the culture of the company. That, along with, we truly do, it takes every person in Cradlepoint performing their role to get done what we need to get done for our customers. And no one job's more important than another. It's all of us. I mean, I always use this example. At the end of the quarter, if Dane's trying to hit his quota, we got a guy in our distribution center in Meridian that's going to throw a pallet of product in the back of his pickup truck and drive it to FedEx to make sure it gets shipped. I mean, that everybody has a role to play in it, and we respect every employee and every employee's role in delivering for our customers.
I love that. That's awesome. Jay talks about how you've had a vision early on that, you said you entered a company that was struggling and, trying to have an exit that returned some money. But was there always a vision of the possibility of building something great, of being, an HP or a Micron for this community? Did you always have that vision, and how do you feel like you've built up to an entity that's comparable? You had this great exit that we're going to talk about next, but did you always have that vision, or did it grow as you grew?
First of all, we're no Micron. We're a long way from that. But all of the early leadership team was Boise based. Many, like Val Husenfeld, our CFO, who's probably the best, smartest business person I've ever worked with, grew up in Idaho, went to U of I. Sorry, BSU. But and as Val and I were talking early on, she was the first outside hire that I made, and it was probably the best decision I ever made at Cradlepoint. But I had seen through startup, my work at Highway 12, and she had been involved with a lot of startups, that many times Boise-based startups would get acquired earlier in their life cycle. And so they didn't really have enough critical mass to, over time, those employees and those jobs got moved back to a headquarters somewhere. And really, we set out, part of our purpose was, how do we build a tech company in Boise, Idaho, and get it to a stage where it's going to have critical mass, so that if we do get acquired, because that's the likely outcome for most venture-backed companies, that it's going to stay here, that we're going to create jobs, that we're going to be able to have a business that sustains itself over time and stays in Boise. We talked about, it'd be great if some of our kids got to work here someday, right?
Yeah.
So gives you a little higher purpose than just, let's make some money.
Yeah, that's great. And that's the perfect segue into talking about the sale. You had this amazing transaction with Ericsson. I want you to talk about the details. But the first question I have is, how did you and the board and the company know that this was the time that you were ready to sell? Or did the opportunity just come knocking and it was too good to refuse? How did you know that this was an appropriate time for you guys to have this exit?
Well, the offer helped, but we'd really been on a path trying to build an IPO candidate company. That had been kind of the mantra for us. Let's build an IPO candidate company. Didn't ever say we'll guarantee we're going to do an IPO, but if we could, and we had about 10 different metrics that we measured and we shared regularly with the organization about, the right growth rates and margin profile and how much recurring revenue, and do we have marquee customers, and are we getting analysts and others to talk about us into the market, and things like that, things that you would need to do an IPO. Turns out those are also very important things if you're going to get acquired. But we had had a number of inbound offers. They were never in a valuation that we thought was that matched the potential we had.
Mhm.
But we started working with Ericsson, and we dated a long time. And it was probably 2 years from the first time the CTO at Ericsson just said to me, we might want to think about making you a part of Ericsson. And then we went for about a year of sharing information and things like that. And then COVID hit and they backed off and said, oh man, these guys aren't going to make it. And we wound up doing well in COVID. And then they came back and made the offer right in the middle of COVID. And we did the whole thing virtually, which was pretty interesting.
That's wild.
But it was for us, and I feel this way more so now that we're a part of Ericsson. It was the best acquirer we could have ever had. We built our whole business with that cellular network being a black box to us. Just really bright engineers that created high quality solutions that are really the best in the world. And I got to give the team credit. They've just done an amazing job. Well, with Ericsson, we just got bought by the guys that build that black box. So our opportunity to create value for our customers down the road as the world moves to 5G, and 5G is going to be more important for the enterprise than any connectivity technology in the last multiple decades. It looked like a terrific opportunity for us. The other thing was they wanted every single employee in the company. There were no cost synergies, and they wanted to invest into the company, and they wanted to build the business. And they're actually building an enterprise business around Cradlepoint. So Ericsson sees the enterprise, because 5G and the role it's going to play there, as one of the next great growth engines for that company. And so, we got acquired in November of 2020, and we've hired 400 people since then.
Oh.
So they're investing for the long term. And that was something else that, when you want to build a business that stays in Boise and grows in Boise, it was like the perfect acquirer for us.
Wow. That's a great story. I love how you talk about how when you first joined Cradlepoint, you didn't want to be Darth Vader and ask the board to do the rifts or the terminations before you got there, and they did it, and you had to join and immediately do some terminations, which is uncomfortable for anybody. But then the back end of it is on an exit, you kept every employee and went on a hiring rampage to continue to build a business. That's talk about being something bigger than just a money exit. That's a fantastic story.
There's one thing, because there are a couple of Cradlepoint employees in here. I don't know why the hell you're not at work. But, I think one of the unique things in my mind about Cradlepoint is the level of teamwork between the individuals in the company. It's unlike any place I've ever been. It's just a testament to the employees, but everybody's focused on how do we serve the customer? How do we build this business together? It's a very low ego environment, and there are no prima donnas running around. It's like, one of our values is, this sounds a little pithy, but it's don't point a finger, lend a hand. And the whole idea is, your problem's my problem. I'll work with you to help solve it. But if one area's got a problem, then all areas are going to suffer from it. So it's just a great set of employees that really care.
That's great. I'm gonna have to remember that. Don't point a finger, lend a hand. I like that a lot. One of our core values is always assume good intentions, and it's kind of the same deal. I love that. So you said you did this acquisition all virtually. Not only was it all virtually, you were dealing with people on an entirely different continent, many time zones away. Can you give us a little window into the nitty-gritty of the transaction itself and how long it took and how your team engaged in what I know to be a marathon, having worked on those types of transactions? How do you navigate something like that in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, it was an amazing amount of work once the transaction started, and we had a clean room. There were we tried to keep most of the company out of the know, I guess, because we wanted to keep hitting our plan and running the business. But for the people in the clean room, there were thousands and thousands of documents that had to get put together and thousands of questions. They had this information request list that was, it was as thick as the Bible, I think. It was unbelievable. And they're a very thorough organization, right? So they have all these group functions and everybody had to, check off on it. But the team, it's like we'd have a 5 o'clock meeting every night to see how do we do on the questions. We had constant presentations to those guys, all virtual. We did have Buria, the CEO, came out to the site once for 2 hours. He flew in and stopped in and chatted. There was nobody in the building because it was COVID. But other than that, it was all virtual. And, I was just amazed at the amount of work people put in to make this happen, how conscientious they were. Like, Lacey Blue, who's my executive assistant and chief of staff, she was working 18 hours a day on, pulling stuff together, and everybody was on that team. And it was, and plus, they're in Europe, so they liked to start things at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning here, which wasn't always ideal.
Yeah.
But just, it was a lot of work. There were lots and lots of, and every week there was oh my God, this thing's going to fall apart because of X, and then everybody scramble and go work that. And so it was
amazing.
It was a lot of work.
Amazing. And what I also know is the work doesn't end once the acquisition's completed. Even when you've got a great partner like Ericsson that wants to keep you as a standalone entity, that the work continues. So I'll ask one more question and then we'll turn it on to anybody in the audience with questions. But my question is, what has it been like post-acquisition, and what are you excited about next for Cradlepoint or Ericsson together with Cradlepoint?
Yeah, it's so they are running us as a standalone subsidiary. I do have to remind my team sometimes standalone doesn't mean left alone. We have more kind of security and compliance things we have to deal with than we used to. But I've never been more excited for the opportunity for Cradlepoint, frankly. They are, they're talking about what do we want to be in 2025, and what do we need to invest now to be in, that in 2025. Whereas, some of my experience with some of our earlier investors were, where are you going to be next quarter? And if you're not there, what are you going to do to your cost structure to make sure you can take care of that bottom line? So it's a very different attitude in terms of investment, and they do have a long-term view of it. But when you think about the impact 5G is going to have on the enterprise, when you think about the impact that things like private cellular networking are having, where enterprises can create their own cellular network, not even use a carrier. The things that are happening right now with networking and security merging, and the security aspects that are already built into 5G that we can piggyback on top of to create a much more advanced networking and security offering for our customers. It's just, there's a ton of opportunity for the company. And we get to work on a lot of really cool things now. So it's easier to recruit engineers than it used to. Well, I won't say it's easier. And part of the remote work means you can live in Boise and work for Google too. So it's gotten pretty competitive there. But the opportunity is tremendous.
Yeah, to have that strategic vision and the bandwidth to be able to go out and address it. That's very cool. Well, I know you guys probably have some questions, and since we have the opportunity to be in person, I want to give you a chance to ask any questions that we have in the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Jay's going to be our mic.
I'm going to be the
manager.
mic. Here we
Perfect for our online audience.
So I'm curious on the culture side of it. how the culture ended up going for your company. With change, there's always the ups and downs of how it affects the employees. And you touched a little bit on culture as far as not pointing a finger, but how did it impact the culture at your company? And what did you do to, make sure that you maintained a positive culture? And then also with dealing, often we see when you're dealing with another country, there's sometimes culture gaps that you have to deal with. So did you have any of that involved as well? And how's that going?
Yeah, well, we're really just starting to expand much more internationally, more globally. 95% of our business has been North America based. So that's the other place Ericsson's helping us. Frankly, they have a real well-known global brand. They're actually less well-known in the US than the rest of the world. But the culture, one of the things from a culture standpoint, it's really, a lot of it's pretty fundamental. I'm kind of old school. We don't have a climbing wall. We don't have a private chef. If you come to the Boise site, we do have all the cup of noodles you can eat. But if you have a direction people believe in, if they trust their leadership, if they feel like they're making a contribution and they're recognized for that contribution, and they enjoy the people they work with, it's not that hard to come to work in the day. And so I think being able to work on things where you're making a difference, being in an environment where people feel like they're helping each other. And frankly, to be honest, part of the Boise culture became a part of the Cradle Point culture. Boise's been a very helpful, friendly town. I remember when we did the round with TCV, they had a psychologist come in and interview some of us to make sure we weren't wacky. And this psychologist said to me, you guys seem different than, because they all did their work in Silicon Valley. You guys seem kind of different. You don't seem like you have that electricity, that sense of urgency, and all that stuff. And I said, yeah, we don't, but don't mistake that from a lack of competitive spirit and competitiveness and wanting to win in the market, because it's very different. And that is another thing that's been different about Cradle Point is, when we make a mistake or when we hit a bump, nobody runs around like their hair's on fire, right? Okay, we've got an issue to deal with. Let's get together and figure out what we do and how we go about it. But I think at the heart of the culture, it's trust and respect for our employees. It's about the leadership team giving employees a reason to trust them every day. It's about teamwork. It's about making a contribution to our customers. And, it's pretty straightforward, really.
Great.
Any
Who
other-
else has a question?
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your story. I have a few questions, but I'll start with the first. I guess I would love to hear your thoughts, now having gone through sort of the life cycle that has been, your career at HP, stepping into Cradle Point, helping to lead that organization, continuing in that position as a leader within Ericsson. And I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts around, possible companies or even employees at Cradle Point that may spin off and create their own entrepreneurial journey. And, I'm sure there's a bit of a juxtaposition between wanting to retain employees, but also wanting to see the community grow. So I'd just love to hear kind of your ethos and just any ideas or thoughts that you have, or maybe any wisdom that you might impart to somebody within Cradle Point, kind of considering their own next step.
Yeah, I don't know about wisdom, but I had the same philosophy when I was at HP, right? I think it was good for someone to say, I want to go out and try something new or go out and learn. I think the whole tech startup ecosystem, that flywheel is just starting to get going in Boise and Idaho. And what drives it is exits, right? Because then you create a group of people that have some of the seed money to go maybe start their own thing. And I have a regular one-on-one with one of our distinguished engineers. he's constantly running startup ideas by me. And what do you think of this? Or could we do that? And, you know, I would never prevent or try to prevent someone from going out and starting something new here in Boise. And I know it's going to happen. Of course, I want to keep the talent we have as much as I can inside of Cradle Point and give people opportunities to grow and develop. And that's also a key thing for us. But I hope we have some new companies that spin out of Cradle Point over time, that new companies that spin out of Count, that spin out of T-Sheets, that spin out of, you know, the various exits we've had. That's what feeds that ecosystem, right?
Absolutely. I have one more question, unless somebody else wants to jump in here. George, I'd love to hear, you know, I'm sure over the years there have been plenty of hurdles and challenges that have arisen. Any books or just general thoughts, wisdom that have sort of guided you or been a bit of a beacon for you as you've overcome those challenges?
Well, I can't recommend any business books because I usually only get past the first chapter. But there's, you know, Jay mentioned I played tennis at San Jose State, I think. Dane's probably going to be tired of hearing this from me. But there's a quote that has guided me so many times in my career, and it's from Arthur Ashe, who was a great tennis player, US Open champion. And a reporter asked him, said, "What does it take to become a champion?" And I just loved his answer. He said, "Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can." And every time I've hit a roadblock, a tough situation, do I go left or right? That quote is what I used to say, take that first step. It may not be right, but take it, because the second step becomes more clear when you do that. If you have an idea, take that first step to put it into action, to go build it or whatever. You know, don't wait for some VC to come in and give you a bunch of money. Get started, right? So that is certainly something that I always fall back on.
Awesome, thank you.
Jay, you're a very good mic carrier.
You briefly mentioned that it was the CTO at Ericsson that kind of got the ball rolling. What was the relationship like before that? Because I'd imagine you have to be pretty good friends to say, hey, I want to buy your company.
Actually, I can't give the CTO credit. It was really one of our board members, Doug Gilstrap, knew Burya, the CEO of Ericsson. He had run strategy for Ericsson for a while. So for 3 years, he was whispering in Burya's ear, "You should look at these guys. You should take a look at these guys." And he was really instrumental in helping to make that connection. So that was, I would give 90% of the credit there to Doug, our board member, for making that connection and then also guiding us too. And, you know, how do we put together a plan that's going to be attractive to them? I will say, for any of you entrepreneurs looking for funding and things like that, my experience at Cradle Point was every year after we did a fundraise, we missed our plan. So, you know, you have to be so aggressive when you put these plans together. Same thing with Ericsson. We put together this monster plan and we didn't hit it, but we did a lot of good things instead.
And most investors will look at it and say, they're probably not going to hit that.
Yeah, well, they don't tell you that when they're yelling at you. But no, so, you know, there were a lot of connections that got made there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That spawns a question. That's a great question. And can you talk a little bit about your board makeup and your relationship with your board? Boardrooms can be contentious, and there can be different opinions amongst directors and different opinions amongst executives. And there's ideally, a lot of collaboration and added value. But can you talk about the dynamics of your board over the years, or any insight you can give us?
We ended with a fantastic board. Really, the chemistry was great, and The people on it were super helpful. We had a good mix of, there were several occasions along the way where it was horrendous board politics. And I remember one of the fundraising, one of the investors wanted special consideration and wasn't going to approve the deal unless we did this, or they got a board seat, and all those kind of things happened along the way. But when we really settled into kind of the final board, it was a great mix of external independents and investors. And one of our board members, Rick Beluzzo, I just bumped into him at a coffee shop, and he was high level at HP and the CEO of Microsoft, or president of Microsoft, so really experienced guy. And he joined the board, and he was such a good business person with so much experience that the investors respected him. So I had a counterbalance too. Sometimes investors run the company based on a rule of thumb, right? Okay, all my other companies are doing this much gross margin, growing this rate, so you should be doing that. And Rick was a great counterbalance to some of those things, especially if we'd missed our plan, saying, don't worry, they'll get it back on
That's
track.
great.
So we had our ups and downs with the board. But
Yeah, that always is. And the part of their job is to challenge you as an executive, right?
Yeah, and what you want from a board is lots of different perspectives.
Right.
But a good board knows they'll never know as much about the business as the management team does. And all I asked from my board was, you either trust me 100% or 0%, nothing in between, because you can't run a business wondering if your board's going to support you or not. And so it's binary, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. And that's good advice for little baby startups and big companies. So that's great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's sort of a self-serving question, given the place that we're at, Boise State University, and I'm the Dean of Engineering. I know you support us a lot, but what is the role in that ecosystem that you were talking about that universities can play to help companies grow, companies prosper, such as yours? Not only the local universities, perhaps regionally as well, but focus on maybe the local one.
Well, you can keep turning out great engineers. And what I will say, one of the first engineers I met was a BSU grad at Cradle Point. He probably created more value for our company than anybody else in the last 10 years. Gordon, you probably remember him. But anyway, and I'm going to have to tell you my engineering story, because I didn't know you were here. I was at a big HP event. This was years ago. And there were like 500-600 people at it. And Meg Whitman was the CEO at the time, and she was up talking. And, HP has a big site here in Boise. And to this giant audience, she said, the engineers we get out of BSU are just as good as the engineers we get out of Stanford. And I told Bob Custer that years ago. Did he?
Put him on your next commercial.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, we've got great talent from BSU. And the other thing about Boise along the way has been, it wasn't just about jumping from one job to the next for another 5K per year or something like that. We had people that really wanted to make a difference and build something right here in Boise. And so that talent from BSU has always been really important to the company.
Joanne, great question, though. We love Joanne Leidy with the College of Engineering. So thanks, Joanne. We have time for one more question. You have one more? Here we go. Here it goes.
Thank you all for letting me hog the microphone. Not that I gave you much of an option, but I guess my question sort of dovetails with Joanne's question. And that's, looking forward, certainly I'm sure there's a ton of professional achievements on the horizon for Cradle Point and Ericsson, but maybe I'd love to hear if there's anything from a community perspective, anything in terms of, Cradle Point's and Ericsson's joint goals around giving back, around making an impact here locally in Boise, the state of Idaho, anything that you're paying close attention to that you know, either personally or as an organization that you're passionate about driving or being a part of. And then similarly, I also think this plays into that. Love to hear any thoughts you have around diversity, equity, inclusion, steps you're taking in that realm, and what that looks like as you continue to merge and join with Ericsson.
Great. I think that was 3 questions though.
Yeah, it's fine. Overachiever over here.
Well, let me take the diversity one first. That is important to us. And actually, if you were to look at Cradlepoint from a women in leadership position in engineering and throughout the company, we're way above the average for a tech company. And I found a really simple formula for that. You hire a great female leader and she attracts 10 more. And that's really, I mean, we have, Val, who's our CFO, is an amazing business person. But when someone like Lisa Guess, who runs our SE organization, comes in and interviews with us and talks to Val, now Lisa's on the FCC subcommittee for artificial intelligence. She's been she talks to Val, she says, yeah, this sounds like a pretty good place to work. So anyway, so that we're doing pretty good. Where we haven't done as good here is with people of color. And part of it's been the demographics, part of it's been a little bit the reputation. But what we found through COVID, we hired a whole bunch of people, not that a lot of them are remote and will be. We hired them all over the country. And so we've been able to use that remote hiring to build more diversity into the organization in some other areas. So that's been part of the opportunity that created for us. And I just hired a new chief people officer several months ago, and she's, got a lot of, I think, good insight and plans on how to keep building this out. I also sit on a kind of a CEO council of Boise CEOs that Sanjay at Micron kind of put together for a lot of the local CEOs in Boise for how do we kind of give back to the community. Diversity inclusion is one of the key areas that we're working on, and we each have people dedicated to that from our organization. And then as far as giving back to the community overall, for years, we didn't have any money. Our employees have always volunteered on a lot of things and supported the community through their time and effort, and we give people time to do that. And for many years, my position was, we're supporting the community by creating jobs. And our number one job right now is create a whole bunch of jobs. And our Boise payroll is now over $70 million. So we've created some jobs in Boise. Now part of Ericsson, we have a little bit broader canvas we can play off of. And so, for example, Ericsson has an initiative to connect every school in the globe to the internet. And so I've been talking to them about, well, we have a lot of schools in Idaho. Now their focus right now is places like Africa and much more undeveloped kinds of communities and things. But I think we've got now a partner with Ericsson that we can start to do some other things in the community. And we'll always, we do invest in, we try to help pay Jay's salary by donating to the ITC, stuff like that. and be active in Trailhead and the startup community, because I do think, you can only do so much, and if we can keep this startup community growing and thriving, it's going to benefit a lot of people over time.
Any thoughts on establishing a foundation for Cradlepoint or anything along those lines to be more direct?
I'm sorry, starting a foundation?
Yeah. Micron has a foundation, Blue Cross of Idaho has a foundation, a lot of organizations sort of get to that point, and instead of it being a reactionary, here's a donation, here's an X, Y, or Z, being a little bit more pointed.
We haven't really talked about, and while we do have a big parent company, we're probably not at the stage where we could put a very large sum of money to create a foundation that actually had a life of its own. So we're kind of picking our spots right now. I'll look to like Dane, who'll be at Cradle Point a lot longer than me to create a foundation there. But
Very good, thanks.
Well, George, where I think you are most generous is in the use of the most precious commodity, which is your time. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your commitment to our community, the ITC. We're really excited to see where Cradle Point goes from here.
yeah, me too. Thank you.
Let's hear it for George. Here for Allison. Really quickly, I need to say one more thing about this. This is what's happened about the community involvement. George, if you recall, I received a call from the Joint STEM Caucus that from the House and the Senate was trying to, okay, how are we going to further STEM education in the state of Idaho, specifically in K through 12? And they said, can you get someone to come from industry to be able to talk about this and how important it is? So I placed a call to George, and George said, I'd be happy to come speak. And he was electric when he was actually talking. I know because all of the people around the table, so we were up on the table, and there were about 20 legislators, senators and legislators that were there. And they were asking questions to George. And George basically said, here's the deal. We're a company that's putting all hands on deck on trying to grow our company. This was almost 3 years ago, I think, right, George? And George said, we have about a $50 million payroll in Boise. And what we need from you is to be able to focus on getting our kids that graduate from high school the best talent, the best opportunity to compete in a digital world, and realize that that's what we need from you. So those $50 million that are coming in, taxes that are coming in, use those in the right manner. Because right now, he said, frankly, the dollars, if I got this right, George, the dollars that are coming in are focused, laser focused on growing a company like Cradle Point, which now you can see 3 years later has now been acquired by Ericsson, and I loved $70 million payroll.
Yeah, around there.
So that's good. So we can see all this growth. Anyway, fantastic story, and a great. I love the Arthur Ashe quote: "As somebody who loves sports." Thank you so much for all that you do, serious and the guidance that you've given a lot of other people that are doing things in Idaho. They're going to build, have success. So again, let's hear it for George and Allison. Thank you.
I do have to say one more thing. I'm just sitting up here taking credit for everything, all this credit. I mean, this has been a true team effort, and it's a great team, and I wouldn't be sitting here without them.
So let's hear it for the Cradle Point team.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, you guys. And we're third Tuesday. We'll have the same thing, and keep an eye out who's going to be on the next agenda.